2017, I had just gotten promoted to becoming a software engineering lead at Google, building the future of its cloud services. Outside of work, I had a crazy active social life in New York City. It wasn't unusual for me to be going to multiple parties and concerts on any given week. Not to mention, I was making a lot of money. Maybe a little too much for my maturity level. I felt like I had every reason to be happy. But for the most part, I was actually miserable. Of course, I didn't admit that to anyone, much less myself. I was one of those guys that if you asked me how they were doing, they would just say, "I'm doing great." But in reality, I felt an emptiness inside, which was really confusing to me because Google was supposed to be my dream job. I mean, there were a few days that were happier than the day that I got my job at Google in the spring of 2015. That day, I felt like I made it. I would finally have what I need to be happy. I had spent most of my time in college at Duke, and arguably my whole life, working up to that point. Exam after exam, project after project, internship after internship, working my way to the point of securing one of those highly coveted jobs at what was the gold standard for computer science majors. But back to 2017, I never could have predicted that just 2 years after getting my job at Google, I would be miserable. And that just 2 years later, in May of 2019, I would decide to quit. So why in the world would I leave what was at one point my dream job? Let me explain. My decision to quit Google was years in the making, and it started in 2016, when America's divisive presidential election woke me up to America's fragility and downward trajectory. I had previously been extraordinarily complacent about the state of where the country was headed, but it had become increasingly clear that our political system, regardless of which major party was in power, was the source of so many problems in America. I was naive and out of touch, probably because I was so focused on getting promoted, on making more money, on going to increasingly exclusive parties. I also assumed that civilizational stability and progress was somewhat inevitable, and that just about everyone was benefiting from the rapid changes in our global economy. But that just couldn't have been further from the truth. Just because the stock prices of companies like Google are soaring doesn't mean that humanity is flourishing. Between 2016 and 2019, I spent thousands of hours catching up on what I should have known long ago. I devoured books and podcasts. I talked to social entrepreneurs, scientists, activists, bankers, heads of Fortune 100 companies, just trying to make sense of what was happening. And all signs pointed to the following. First, that humanity faces extraordinary challenges that threaten not only civilization, but our species' survival. Our fates are bound together, as demonstrated by the consequences of pandemics, climate change, global economic disparities, growing political polarization, and more. If we cannot come together and act as one species to address our collective challenges, our future will be grim at best. The second thing that my journey taught me was that I was not doing nearly enough to realize my potential to help address these challenges in the US and around the world. As cool as I thought it was to build products that had the potential to affect millions of people, I knew that I needed to be doing more for humanity than just marginally increasing Google's top line. While I knew that my values were changing, leaving Google was not easy. I loved so many of the people there, and the money was really good. And I'm not going to lie, it was really painful to leave the free food. There was a donut bar, a smoothie bar, a ramen bar, all you can eat. And anyone that knows me knows that I love to eat. But I knew that I would have to make sacrifices in order to push humanity forward. But where would I go after Google? What would I do? Realizing that you're not doing enough for humanity is not the same thing as knowing what to do next. So I went on a journey to identify what I call my U-shaped hole. In other words, my place in the world where my passions and talents met humanity's greatest needs. I first looked at my passions and realized that I had fallen in love with learning about all things about developing people, communities, and societies. I then identified my superpowers. I was really tech savvy, good at synthesizing and explaining information from different disciplines, and had a knack for bringing people together into community to get things done. I then assessed humanity's greatest needs. And although there are many that deserve our attention, during that process, I kept coming back to one need: the need for democracy reform. I saw that social media had become increasingly toxic. Our democratic institutions had dramatically eroded, and our elected officials at every level seemed neither willing nor able to get anything done. I also saw that Generation Z, the generation that will represent 25% of the voting population by 2030, was not getting what it needed to realize its potential to build the future of democracy. From there, I needed to figure out where the passions that I had identified, the superpowers that I had discovered, and the need for democracy reform would meet. And that would take some time. When I began telling people that I was contemplating breaking what are infamously called Google's golden handcuffs, I got a ton of pushback from friends and family members. Many thought that I was going through a phase, that I wasn't thinking clearly, that I was crazy to want to give up that cushy job at Google. One of my closest friends from Duke said to me, "I don't think you should spend much time thinking about the problems in the world. You're not going to be able to do much about those things. It's a lot safer to just focus on yourself and make a bunch of money." I disagreed. Reflecting on what my friend had said, I realized that I wouldn't have been able to live with myself, knowing that there was a way that I could make the world a better place, but I decided to instead take the easy path and get rich while watching humanity's problems get worse. But in order to convince my family and friends and fully convince myself that it made sense to leave Google, I needed to find people that were willing to go all in with me. Luckily, at the beginning of 2019, after years of networking and learning, I met an eclectic, intergenerational group of hopeful do-gooders who saw what I saw: the need and opportunity to empower young people to take the future of democracy into their own hands. It was meeting these people, my eventual Civics Unplugged co-founders, that finally gave me the courage to quit my job. They taught me something very important. Democracy can't wait. Why must we urgently act to save our democracy? The challenges we face, including the climate crisis, skyrocketing inequality, and rising geopolitical tensions, are very real and complex. And all of them deserve a great deal of time and attention. But if we don't prioritize reforming and revitalizing our democracy, America will sink under the weight of these great challenges, because these challenges all require some kind of government action to solve. Addressing these challenges will require the kind of creative leadership, nuanced thinking, and hard trade-offs that binary, toxic politics subverts. It will require a political system that incentivizes partisan leaders to make the complicated, multidimensional compromises that are needed. A nation divided cannot solve these big problems. If we don't get the politics right, we're not going to get the policies right. As political reform expert Lee Drutman once said, America's winner-take-all electoral rules are the antiquated, cracking levees of a political system that is flooding with toxic conflicts. If we don't fix the underlying structural issues and channel conflict better, everything else is just taking buckets to a flood. So how does Civics Unplugged reform and revitalize our democracy? CU channels Gen Z's passion, creativity, and imagination towards reforming and rebuilding their political systems. Over the course of the decade, CU will provide training, funding, and community for tens of thousands of Gen Z leaders devoting themselves to building the future of democracy. Along the way, these democracy builders will inspire millions to follow in their footsteps. While we are only on year 2 of our journey, we are off to a strong start. Our community, which is a mini democracy of its own, led by a group of community elected representatives, consists of almost 1,000 Gen Z leaders from every state in the US and now over 40 countries around the world. And we've been recognized by CBS This Morning, Nickelodeon, Reuters, and even Forbes 30 Under 30. I'm proud to say that unlike in 2017, I'm happy. I really am. I feel like where I'm at with Civics Unplugged is my U-shaped hole, my place in the world where my passions and my superpowers meet humanity's greatest needs. But as cool as the work we're doing is, we obviously cannot build the future alone. I'm here to tell you, humanity needs you. Maybe you're stuck in what you imagine would be your dream job and you're having second thoughts. Maybe you're like how I was in 2017, seeing problems in the world and feeling like you're not realizing your potential to do something about them. Maybe you're recognizing that just like democracy can't wait, climate change can't wait, or transforming education can't wait. Here's the thing, no matter what you love to do, no matter what your talents are, you have the power to make a difference in the world. You have the power to be the source of so many people's upward spirals. You don't have to create a democracy reform organization to begin taking responsibility for humanity's future. And it really may not make sense for you to quit your job. But recognize that no matter where you want to channel your passions and superpowers, you will have to change yourself to change the world. My own story illustrates this point. Before co-founding CU, my journey toward taking responsibility for humanity's future started with myself. In 2018, I was definitely not plugged into my U-shaped hole. I was unsatisfied at work, and outside of work, I was harming my body. I wasn't working out, I was addicted to Twitter, and I was addicted to partying. 2018 was the year where in one period I drank for 28 days straight. And I actually bragged about that streak to friends, probably because I needed to justify my embarrassing and unsustainable lifestyle. Recognizing that the change I wanted to see in the world wouldn't happen until I changed myself. I decided at the beginning of 2019 to quit drinking cold turkey. I was tired of spending my time devoted to partying and not my purpose. Killing my drinking habit sparked inside me an upward spiral. Shortly after, I started running, then journaling, then meditating, then regularly sleeping 8 hours a day, then cutting out sugary drinks. The list goes on. In just a few months, I was functioning at a level that was 3 to 4x higher than I was performing in 2018. I was a better thinker, friend, brother, son, colleague, and human. I was happier and healthier than ever before, and seeing all this change in myself helped give me confidence to leave Google and change the world. But what do we mean at CU when we talk about changing the world? While we have had the privilege of supporting successful democracy reform efforts around the US, what I'm actually most proud of is the difference we've been able to make in the lives of the kids in our community. One of the ways that we invest in our kids is by doing what we like to call one-on-ones. Once a week meetings where team members such as myself meet with a kid to just find out how are they doing and how can we be helpful. These one-on-ones are usually only 10 to 15 minutes, but they make a huge difference in our kids' lives. It's amazingly energizing for any person, especially a kid, to have someone in their life who actually listens to them, allows them to not be put together, sees them for the complex human that they are, and affirms that, yeah, life right now is pretty disorienting. In a time of masks, both literally and figuratively, allowing people to just be and take their time to adapt to this ever-changing world is revolutionary. One of our kids who created an amazing virtual summer camp for hundreds of our peers last year sent this to me the other day. Empowerment is such a buzzword, but CU is the definition of empowering. The team and community have instilled in me the confidence to lead projects that can really make a difference in people's lives. If CU is any indication of what democracy is supposed to feel like, let's spread the love everywhere. For me, seeing what happens when these kids plug into their U-shaped holes, seeing the magic that is created when they step into their potential, that's priceless. I'll leave you with this. Imagine what the world could be if everyone was plugged into their U-shaped holes, doing everything they could to be the person they could be for themselves and for their colleagues, classmates, friends, and family. Imagine all the second and third order effects all of these inspired, empowered people could create for our communities, our country, and our world. Imagine that future. That future is possible. And no pressure, but it starts with you.